Okay, so you're on Brazil. So saying on Brazil, when Napoleon got control over Portugal, uh, King João, who I said earlier, he fled to Brazil, and he's like, "Well, I am your king, so I'm the king of Portugal and the king of Brazil, and I'm just hanging out here." And so Rio de Janeiro became the new heart of the Portuguese Empire. And Rio de Janeiro is an amazing harbor, and there's a lot of evidence to um, support the statement that it's the best natural and deep water harbor in the world. You'll see a lot of Rio. Well, you might have already with the World Cup that was just there, and then the Summer Olympics will be there in 2016. So when Napoleon gets defeated, Joao leaves, heads back to Portugal because that's where his, he's most comfortable and that's where his power truly is. And his son Pedro is in control of Brazil. So now, technically, Brazil has two monarchs, right? Because Joao is the king of Portugal and also Brazil. And then his son is also in control of Brazil. So it was a little bit confusing. And the uh, elite took advantage of this confusion and said, "Hey, Pedro, why don't you be your own king of your own nation? Stop sharing power with your papa and, make yourself a constitutional monarchy." And he's like, "I." So Brazil is now independent with King Pedro the First, and it's no longer tied to Portugal. I mean, technically, there's a family tie there because Pedro's still, Joao's son. However, Portugal does not own Brazil anymore. But this independence, yes, it's a constitutional monarchy, and yes, Pedro promised all these wonderful things, but now he's like, dude, I'm king in my own right. I'm totally going to be absolute ruler because I can. And that leads to a lot of discontent, a lot of upheaval, and by 1831, Pedro abdicates, and liberal Creoles exert their influence because his son Pedro II comes into power, but he's not as um I guess he's not we can say he's not trying to prove as much as his dad did, and he was more willing to work with the liberals and bring in more enlightened ideas. Uh he's not the most fortunate looking man, and he reminds me of someone, and I honestly can't remember who right now. He's like a famous actor, and I can't think of. Oh, the guy from Mad Men. But you probably don't watch Mad Men. But there's an actor in Mad Men. I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep going now. Um, so it takes about 50. What's that? 50. It's 57 years. So for 57 years, um, Brazil, it's a slow transition from a constitutional monarchy to a democratic republic. And really, it's hard to go to a democratic republic overnight anyway. So this 57-year period was probably a good thing. Of course, there was conservatives who tried to stop any possible progress because that's what conservatives did at this time, because what they do is they fight against change, and there's a lot of change going on in Brazil. In 1888, slavery was officially ended, and in 1889, the monarchy finally ended. So Brazil today is still a democratic republic. They are the most ethnically diverse country in the world, um, and they are still a major producer of coffee, sugar, and myriad other cash crops. They're definitely a cash crop economy for sure. And you can see it's a 2006 chart, but the European influence in Brazil is very, very heavy. If you think about the chart you saw for Haiti, that was such a small European population. That's what makes the Haitian Revolution so special. And you still have extremely small indigenous population, but most are, there's a result of that miscegenation that they try to um, show themselves as being, I guess, better with their colonies than the others. So that has had a long lasting effect as well. All right, so heading over to Mexico, which was Spain's largest and most symbolically important colony, thanks to Cortez, who conquered the Aztecs. Um, you have very conservative peninsulares, um, and the Creoles wanted to replace the Spanish monarchy with a new Mexican monarch. Uh, it's not so much that they wanted to have a democratic republic, they wanted to keep that absolute monarchy, but it should be a Mexican absolute monarchy. It shouldn't be, led by a monarch from from across the ocean. And the mestizos were like, whoa, 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 what is this? Like, why, we, we were rebelling because we thought we were in this together and we were going to become, liberty and equality and fraternity and all those enlightenment ideas. And you want to have a monarch over us? Like, that's not change. It's just changing a name. It's not changing anything important. So this was, a lot of tensions were brewing in Mexico. Um, but Father Miguel Hidalgo, he fought against those conservatives. He wanted to show the mestizos that not everybody was against them. Not all the Peninsulares and Creoles were against them. And he led an uprising. He lost, and they killed him. So Spain kills a priest. And this does not go over well. This was like a huge PR mistake. And of course, they killed people, and loss of human life is always terrible. But the fact that it was a priest in particular that their critics just went nuts, saying, they'll stop at no ends, like, even a man of God, nobody's safe under these people. And Hidalgo becomes just as strong in his death as a martyr, for these lower class Mexicans, and even to this day is still revered as someone who, gave his life for the betterment of the lower classes. So by 1824, Mexico was free from Spain. They gained their independence and they had a democratic constitution. And you can see that democratic is in quotes. And for whatever reason, I actually just did the air quotes with my hands, but you can't see me, so that doesn't really help anything. But I don't really know what was democratic about it. I mean, there was no land reform. The Creoles still controlled all of the territory. It's not like it got redistributed to the peasants. Um, the natives living there, there's nothing there like to protect them. Poverty was still just massive, nothing done to help them. And you still have now these tensions between liberals and conservatives, and a civil war almost broke out. So the United States is like, all right, chaos, disorder, let's expand. So in 1836, that was the Battle of the Alamo, which you will learn all about in U.S. history. It does not have a basement. So if anybody ever tells you to go look for something in the basement of the Alamo, it's not there. If you ever saw the movie Pee-wee's Big Adventure, you know what I'm talking about. In 1845, you have the Mexican-American War, where General Antonio Santa Anna, who was very conservative, he defeated the Texans at the Battle of the Alamo. And later on, he lost to Sam Houston, which is, oh my gosh, is Houston the capital of Texas? I'm pretty sure Houston's the capital of Texas. And it's named after Sam Houston, who was able to defeat the Mexicans and acquiring more territory. And for whatever reason, that picture you see in the middle, that is Santa Anna's leg. He had a prosthetic leg, and it is kept in a museum for all of prosperity to go lay their eyes on. Oh, so this is a map of the Mexican-American War, and you can see the territories that we acquired through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Okay, so liberals under the leadership of Benito Juarez refined the new Mexican Constitution. This is where you see a little bit more enlightened ideas coming in. You have the better treatment for the natives and the mestizos. Of course, the conservatives were not pleased with this, at all. So they actually say to the French, hey, France, come conquer us. Come conquer Mexico. Let's reestablish a monarchy and you can be our new rulers. So the French actually send Maximilian von Habsburg to um, go and capitalize on this request and try to, get a French connection into the New World. And that's where we get Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo is not the Mexican Independence Day. It's actually a day that the Mexicans defeat the French in the Battle of Puebla. So when you go out on Cinco de Mayo and celebrate all things Mexican, again, it's not the Mexican Independence Day. It's the Mexicans defeated the French, who were invited by the conservatives to come and try to conquer, to stop these liberals from, being liberal. And by 1867, the liberals completely got the French out, and they had control over Mexico until 1880. And then you start to see a change and more conservative people coming into power. But that is what Cinco de Mayo is all about. Um, so in 1876, Porfirio Diaz becomes president. Now he's elected, absolutely elected, and he rules for 35 years like a dictator. So again, you have this revolution where more enlightened ideas come in, and then you go back to this whole, dictatorship. But at least he was elected. Um, and he said, yeah, come on in, U.S., totally bring your money and invest in us. But as the American capitalists made more money, the Mexicans remained poor, as did the country of Mexico, and anybody who said anything against Porfirio Diaz, of course, was silenced. So in the 1910s, the 1920s, you have a second Mexican Revolution, where Diaz is ousted. Mexico is like, okay, let's try socialism, maybe even communism. And that's gonna make more sense to you when you hear about this guy Leon Trotsky from the Soviet Union, who will exile himself there. Um, but that they never actually become communist. So this is a great sum up. Again, you will have access to this presentation on Google Classroom, and then you can watch this overview. And again, it's Crash Course History, lesson number 31, and it just brings everything together that I just talked about. So this is the big change. If you look at the map in 1790, you can see the Spanish and the Portuguese had the majority of the possessions. The Brits, the Dutch, and the French also have some as well. But by 1828, South America is predominantly independent. The Brits and the Dutch and the French still have a few colonies there, but the majority of it, they're their own independent nations, and that is a result of people like Simon Bolivar and Father Hidalgo and others who, ultimately gave their lives into freeing Latin America from European control. And that's actually, that's we're going to pick up with that in class. So I apologize for the tiredness and for the, lapses in speech and the pauses, but I appreciate you listening. If you have any questions, write them down, and we will talk about them in class on Tuesday. Thanks so much. Have a great night.